Today's topic is a 264 tank engine from the London, Midland and Scottish Railway. The Fowler 4P is not a new addition to Train Simulator, having already been modelled by Iron Horse House many years ago. But I never had the original AHH model, and from what I've seen of it in other people's videos, it has aged quite poorly. As such, I was curious to see this new version from Caledonia Works, about which I had already known for a while prior to its release. This video is not sponsored by the developer, and I bought this add-on with my own money. CW released their version of the Fowler 4P on the 22nd of August 2025, and she's available to buy from their website for £20, or around $48.40 NZD, which is the absolute limit of how much I'm prepared to pay for a TS Classic add-on these days. I've wanted to see a new version of this class in-game for a fair while, and as usual, I can't fault Chris Wilson's work when it comes to the modelling and texturing. I always thought the 4P was a well-proportioned locomotive, although I'm not really sure why, and in a strange way, she reminds me of the Great Western Railway 7200 class, even though that's a 282, while simultaneously looking like a predecessor to the BR standard 4MT tanks. On the subject of this family of 264s, CW is also modelling the Stania tanks of 1934, but I'm yet to decide on whether or not I'll buy the pack once it's released. As for the Fairburn engines of 1945, these have never been modelled for Train Simulator, as far as I know, but they are on CW's list of future DLC, so that's exciting. Here's hoping the Caledonian Blue livery for 42073 will be included. And now for a very brief history on the 4P. This was a class designed by Sir Henry Fowler for use on general passenger services, and built at Derby Works between 1927 and 1934. Although they were most often used to haul commuter trains around London and Manchester, some of them were used as bankers on the climb from T-Bay to Shap Summit on the West Coast Main Line. I know that you can get a steam-era version of the T-Bay to Shap section as part of the Stainmore, Shap and Eden Valley route, but I haven't got it yet, and I'm not prepared to pay £29 for a TS Classic route. Anyway, all 125 members of the Fowler 4P class survived into British Railways ownership, but they had all been withdrawn by 1966, with none surviving into preservation. The nearest thing to a Fowler 4P that has been preserved is Northern Counties Committee WT Class No. 4 over in Northern Ireland. If my research is correct, the same group who's currently building a replica of LMS Patriot No. 5551 also intends to build a replica of 4P No. 42424 after the Patriot is done. Originally, the 4Ps were built with a wide cutout on each side of the cab, but this was modified to be much smaller later on. Both the original and smaller cutouts are modelled in the CW pack, and although they may not be noticeable when you're looking at individual locomotives, it's clear to see when we put two of them side by side. Now I don't know about you, but personally, I have no preference out of these two. Meanwhile, we can also see that Mr. Wilson has modelled the later Stania-style cab, otherwise known as the limousine cab for some reason, with which the last 30 members of the 4P class were built. Here's the complete selection of liveries you get in the pack, although why I decided to set this lot up at St Blaise in Cornwall, of all places, is anyone's guess. Regardless, the liveries you get are LMS Crimson Lake, my personal favourite of the bunch, LMS Lined Black, LMS Unlined Black, British Railways Unlined Black with the transitional Gill Sans lettering, and British Railways Lined Black. Variants of the LMS and BR liveries are labelled as V1, V2 or V3 in the scenario editor, depending on whether they have the original large cab cutout, the smaller cutout, or the later Stanier style cab. Two different fonts for the numbers and lettering are included for the LMS Lined Black variant, labelled as code B3 and code B11, while the LMS Unlined Black is only available with one font, code C18. There's a decent range of customisable details on the 4P, as has often been the case with CW products released over the last 3 years or so, with one of my favourite examples being the LMS Patriot 460, which was released in March 2024. Details you can change on the 4P include the running number, smokebox door paint, inside or outside steam pipes, I prefer the latter myself, smooth or riveted water tanks, again I prefer the latter, the chimney type, and in the case of the BR Lined Black variant, adding or removing overhead warning stickers, and changing the decals on the water tanks. However, the amount of customization options will depend on the variant you select. In the case of the LMS Crimson Lake variant, the only details you can change on this one are the number, shed code, steam pipes, and smokebox door paint. Thinking back to things related to the scenario editor, the 4P does not come with any scenarios. This doesn't really bother me, since I usually just set up a free roam scenario these days, but I can understand why someone might have a problem with the lack of scenarios. In any case, the 4P does have QuickDrive consists, for which the requirements are listed in a text file included with the add-ons folder when you download it from CW's website. The 4P makes use of SimNation's Locomotion 2.0 scripting, and the included features are consistent with what I've come to expect from newer CW products. The list of features includes, but is not limited to, customizable headlamps, toggled on or off by pressing Ctrl 1, Ctrl 2, Ctrl 3 and Ctrl 4, realistic performance physics, fluctuating water level depending on the route gradient, dynamic scripting for wheel slip in all weather conditions, lump firing simulation, although I forget what that means, a fire intensity synchronized with the exhaust beat, the ability to toggle between simple and advanced mode by pressing Ctrl A, and, as always, performance mode, which is toggled on or off by pressing Shift P. There's also a custom auto fireman included, and this is toggled on or off by pressing Ctrl R, but I don't use the auto fireman myself due to my preference for manual firing. As for the sound set, it's pretty good for the most part. But I'm not a fan of the spacebar whistle loop. The only other criticisms I have of this locomotive are the lack of headboards, and regardless of whether you've got an engine with the latest Stanier cab or original Fowler cab, you can't open the cab side doors, or the cabinet on the back wall, for that matter, although the Stanier cab does, at the very least, have opening windows. As is tradition with bigger locomotives at this point, I took the 4P for an endurance run over part of the Western Lines of Scotland route, covering the 29.9-mile-long section from Newton Stewart to Castle Douglas, with 2338 hauling a rake of LMS Period 3 coaches. For reference, those coaches are the ones that come with CW's LMS Princess Royal Pack. It's worth mentioning that this locomotive, like many other CW products, is scripted to have an advanced boiler heating system, so you should sit idle for a few minutes at the start of the scenario to let the boiler warm up. According to the manual, the ideal fire mass for the 4P is between 900 and 910 pounds, or around 43% on the Fisher-Price toolbar, and the ideal water level is between 70% and 90%. I was curious to see how well the 4P would do with 7 coaches on a route with gradients as steep as 1 in 60. The 1 in 100 descent from Newton Stewart helped her get up to a decent speed, and she was doing 60 miles per hour by the time she blasted through the abandoned Palnure station and hit the long climb to Greetown and Gatehouse of Fleet. The 4P was down to 38 miles per hour by the time she got to Creetown, and she gained no extra speed on the climb to Gatehouse of Fleet. It was hard work trying to manage the coal and water levels on top of making sure that I didn't lose too much steam. I was initially hoping to pull off this run without any intermediate stops, and as I went up the climb out of Creetown and hit the 1 in 65, I thought I might have to stop at Gatehouse of Fleet anyway to raise steam. Fortunately, 2338 didn't stall on the incline or lose as much steam as I thought she would, so I decided to carry on through the station without stopping. From that point on, it was a sprint down the 1 in 65 to the Big Water of Fleet viaduct, and the remaining uphill sections before Castle Douglas were not as steep as what I had to deal with between Creetown and Gatehouse of Fleet. Indeed, I was going fast enough to coast over the next hill after the viaduct without needing to open the regulator, and I didn't even end up losing too much speed. Not having to open the regulator certainly helped a fair bit with keeping the boiler pressure up. After meeting another big tank engine at New Galloway, it was a quick descent down the 1 in 80 to the Loch Ken Viaduct, which happens to be one of my favourite locations on the Western Lines of Scotland route. In contrast to the hilly section we just tackled, it's a mostly flat run between the Loch Ken Viaduct and Castle Douglas station. I've always liked using this part of the Port Road for testing bigger locomotives, because the steep grades offer a good challenge. I generally don't put smaller locomotives, as in those with a power rating of 3 or lower, through the same test, because they would likely struggle on the inclines. It took me 53 minutes to complete this latest test run, and as for why I chose 2338 of all 4Ps, it's because she has the same number as a DSC shunter on the Goldfields Railway in Wei He. Feel free to check the video in the top right corner for footage of this locomotive in action. Although this add-on is not flawless by any means, I've still enjoyed inspecting the LMS Fowler 4P. Caledonia Works' recreation of these fascinating tank engines absolutely blasts the old Iron Horse House model right out of the water, and I can easily recommend this locomotive to other TS Classic players who like British steamers, but I would also recommend waiting for a sale and buying the 4P then. She goes well with the 4F, 2P, Patriot, and other LMS locomotives brought to the game by CW, and as for what I'd rate this 264 tank engine, I think she deserves an 8 out of 10. If you've stayed watching through to the end of the video, you win a very unusual medley of Tony Basil and Roxy music. It's Do You Wanna Dance Away? I make that joke despite hating Dance Away for how it hits far too close to home. But as for Do You Wanna Dance by Tony Basil, that's the very definition of an 80s hidden gem.